Welcome to the Girl Dad Show.
Welcome to the Girl Dad Show, a professional parenting podcast. Each month, I interview entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals who are balancing parenthood, life, and profession in the hopes to learn what it takes to be an amazing professional parent. Today on the Girl Dad Show, I'm interviewing Jason Suhoy, CEO and founder of Supercast, an amazing dad of two, and an awesome husband. In this episode, we dive into topics such as how your family, history, and culture influences your upbringing and how you raise your kids. We talk about finding time for yourself and being intentional as you are raising your kids in an entrepreneurship house where both parents are building businesses. And also how you have to be very, very dedicated to your spouse and significant other and carving out that time to spend with each other so that the family unit as a whole is healthier and happier. It's a great episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Jason, yes, thank you so much for joining me today on my show.
Young, excited to chat, man.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. Why don't you tell the listeners what you do for a living?
Sure. So I work in tech, have been in tech startups for well over a decade at this point. And I am the CEO and co-founder of a startup called Supercast.
Nice.
So Supercast is a platform actually in the field of podcasting.
So meta.
Yeah, what we do is we help podcasters that have established audiences monetize with premium subscriptions. As we know, a lot of podcasters, they built up an audience. They might be making some money with ads, which is awesome. That's great. That's one way of kind of earning money from your craft. We approach it completely differently with the idea that you could be offering your true fans in your audience, the top 5% of your audience, a premium version of your podcast. So bonus episodes, extended interviews, the ability to ask questions, AMA episodes, etc. Whatever it is that, you want to offer as a creator, there is, a portion of your audience that will be prepared to pay you $5, $10, $15, to get that additional engagement and that deeper connection with you.
That's awesome. And so what made you do this? Are you like a huge podcast fan, or like what drove the desire to start a business to do this service in the podcast realm?
Yeah. So I have been, basically in the creator space, the creator economy, as they call it these days, for, the bulk of my career. So before I was at Supercast, I was COO and fifth employee at another business called 99 Designs, which is a global marketplace for graphic design. We kind of burst onto the scene. And around 2008, 2009, with this idea that you could get a logo or something designed on the internet, and rather than trying to pick a designer based on their portfolio on something like Upwork, you could just describe what you want, hey, I need podcast artwork for a show, Girl Dad, and this is what the show's about, and show me what you got, world, and then basically you would get concepts from all over the world. We had over 1.5 million designers, all around the world, registered talented designers who wanted to earn extra money. And you would get typically 60 to 80 different concepts from a dozen different designers, and then you could choose your favorite design. That was just, it was a wild journey with 99 Designs. The first 3 years we were bootstrapped, and then eventually, Patreon got their logo design, 99 Designs, Stack Overflow, Docker, all these iconic companies, you were getting their logos designed from this dinky little startup, in Australia. Yeah. And we just faked our way. You faked being a US company, in the early days, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. And then, eventually VCs started knocking, and we raised Series A with Excel partners. I moved over here to the US, as part of that journey, because most of our customers were from the US. Just started moving into different roles. So, kind of product and operations first, expanding, the product team in Australia, and through like growth and partnerships over here in the US. And eventually that the business was acquired by Vistaprint. So obviously, when you get things printed, like they need to be designed somehow, and so there was just a really
wow.
synergy
I know about
there.
99 Designs. I didn't know that Vistaprint bought it. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's right. And
awesome.
that was that came about as part of like the partnership stuff that we started to do. We started to think about 99 Designs not only as a marketplace on its own, but as a way for other businesses to tap into the power of design. And so we partnered with Squarespace, for example. If you're on Squarespace and you didn't realize it was a DIY product, like how do you find somebody, that can design your site for you? You can now do that, through a partnership with 99 Designs. Same with Square. And then we got talking to printing companies, and then we got talking to Vistaprint, and, there was a bigger
natural
play there.
fit. Yeah.
So
that's wild.
Anyway, that's a long way of saying we've been working with creators and helping creators get paid, like for a long time. Interestingly, I first kind of got into podcasting because Tim Ferriss, for a lot of people, when I mention 99 Designs, they're like, oh yeah, I heard about you guys on the Tim Ferriss show. And, he used 99 Designs to design the cover of his second book. And therefore, when he launched his podcast and he approached us about sponsorship, I was like, yeah, like we'll absolutely sponsor. And he could just speak so authentically, about his experience with 99 Designs. So it was an incredible acquisition channel, for reaching, like all the entrepreneurs in Tim's audience who would then go on to start their own businesses and, get new logos and so on and so forth. But as I kind of like developed that relationship with Tim's podcast, I then started listening, and then I started adopting his diet, and I started adopting his workout regimes. And, I really, like, cause he was in my ears, I fell in love, and I felt that that connection with, kind of the host of a podcast that, really is something special about podcasting. And so when the opportunity came about to basically work with Andrew Wilkinson from Tiny, who had basically, happened upon this opportunity of pairing together podcasting and the subscription business model, I couldn't help but jump in.
That's an amazing story. I love it, and you make it sound so effortless. But I'm sure it's riddled with all sorts of ups and downs and learnings and crossroads and all sorts of decisions you've had to make. Yeah, that's a wild story. What's kind of fun too, because most listeners don't know, is that we just met recently. We only met like a couple months ago, and we ended up becoming like besties very, very fast. We started hanging out very, very quickly after that, and connected. And it's like so fun to like hear the actual full story, because actually I haven't even heard the full story. That's so awesome. Out of all the times we've hung out, like now I kind of like have even a better grasp. But I learned it because you're on my podcast versus us hanging out and breaking bread, which is awesome. But let's go into it. So then, so the podcasting, I was actually wondering about that too, because I listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast as well, and I totally know what you mean. Like, it's amazing, because I don't know if you do it like in the morning, but I listen to it in the morning as I'm making coffee and I'm kind of getting ready for my day. I just put on a podcast and I'll rotate through the ones that I like, and then but like it's like a interesting thing, because I've realized there's two things that I've noticed about podcasting. One is that there's a lot more podcasters than there have ever been, and two, I think people that listen to podcasts like really listen to podcasts, and then people that don't. There seems to be a delineation. And I could be totally wrong in this, but have you noticed any of those kind of things that I just mentioned?
Well, for sure, there's a lot more podcasters. So, I think in 2021, it doubled from like 1 million podcasters at the end of 2021 to 2 million, and this is just in terms of like the number that have RSS feeds, that are basically, in the directories. So, that's kind of an Apple Podcasts reported number. Now, of course, like anything, a bunch of those people probably picked up, pandemic hobbies and, like bought a microphone,
totally.
Totally. did an episode or two. So by people's educated guesses, seems like there's somewhere around 750,000, active podcasts in the world, in terms of like regularly, publishing episodes. And then, as far as like listener engagement, there's a pretty, the penetration rate, I think we're up to something like 45%, like of Americans like listen to podcasts on a weekly basis. Which sounds like really high, right? Like it sounds, and for sure it is high. But then like the kind of like the analog for radio is something like 95%, which I don't know that I fully believe that number. Like I can't remember the last time I listened to radio.
Me neither. Yeah.
So, you've always got to pay attention to where stats are coming from and whose purpose it serves.
Yeah.
But, for sure, there are people that, like I think, the averages reported are that people listen to, 8 episodes a week and, like in terms of like engaged listeners and then, like from 5 shows. And like that. Yeah. So that seems to indicate, when people love
you literally
podcasts,
just like described me. That's awesome. That's quite literally me. That's my number of podcasts that I follow more religiously, and that's the number of listen that I listen to a week. That's so interesting. That's wild. Very cool. Now I kind of know how you got into the space in your professional journey here. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your kids?
Yeah, so I have 2 wonderful children, a 4-year-old girl by the name of Charlie, and I guess, like she is my ticket to getting on this podcast. So I was, girl dad first. And then we followed that up with Taylor, who's 2 years old, turned 2 today, actually. So we had a little... happy birthday muffin for him.
Congratulations. Happy birthday.
Before he went off to daycare this morning. And it'll be a birthday weekend. So, we've got kind of like the balance of the two. Charlie was actually born in New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand originally. Wow. And so we 4 years ago decided to basically, go back out to New Zealand. Even though we lived in the US, we went back to New Zealand, towards the end of my wife's pregnancy and gave birth to her there so that we could be, kind of like surrounded by the family, the bulk of which are still back in New Zealand. And then Taylor was a pandemic baby. So he was born April 2020, like just after everything locked down. We lived in the Bay Area at the time. So that's a wildly different experience, but incredible kids.
Any like pros and cons with having a Charlie being born in New Zealand? Like, I mean, obviously sounds like you did it because you wanted to be near family and it was kind of a momentous moment, but like, I'm assuming the citizenship and the paperwork and stuff is also really interesting, right? As a kid? That's right.
It turns out with New Zealand citizenship, which they both have, you will get it either way. So
got it. Doesn't
Charlie,
matter, yeah.
Exactly. So, like the process is slightly different, but obviously Charlie, you get one automatically and then the other one you have to apply for. So it was just flipped, between the two of them. So they both are, US and New Zealand citizens.
Yeah. And then I have to ask this because I know this, but I think it's really important that the listeners know so that it sets the stage for the next question. Your wife is also an entrepreneur, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And then do you mind briefly sharing what she does and when she started her business?
Yeah. So Cheryl, she's been an entrepreneur from way back, actually. So she used to live in New York, and that's where she, started her first startup. This is in the days of like, Groupon, Living Social, Keep on Buying. And so she had like a wallet product based on people buying so many coupons they needed, to organize them. And she pivoted that, to a, kind of a personalized shopping startup, moved out to San Francisco, and then ended up getting acquired by Walmart Labs. So that was kind of like stage 1 of her startup journey. Stage 2 was she went back to Malaysia, where she's originally from, where she was born, and she helped. She was tapped by the Malaysian government, the Prime Minister, to actually come and turn Malaysia into the Silicon Valley of Asia.
Oh,
and
wow.
what she did was essentially it was like kind of like like organizing the entire ecosystem. Like it was part general assembly, part co-working, part like kind of getting demo days and kind of that sort of thing happening, so that she could rally all of Asia's investors around the idea of a startup ecosystem, and then also putting on an annual conference that where everyone gets together and she can bring in experts from around the world, one of whom was me. So that's how we actually ended up meeting. Is a mutual friend said, hey, you should get Jason from 99 Designs from Australia to come and speak at your next conference. She did, and it took basically 4 days for me to realize that, she was something pretty special. On the fourth day, in the middle of a nightclub, I declared my love, and and that I saw a future for us together. It was a bit more complicated than that, but the obviously the short story is that, or the end result is that 6 years we're now in the US with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old to our names.
I love it. That's an amazing story, man. That's fantastic. You guys are like world travelers in addition to being entrepreneurs and making it all work. I'm learning so much about you in this podcast. This is so fun for me. But it does drive me to the next question, because I really have been meaning to ask you this. Like, what's it like having two founder parents, two startup parents, starting their own businesses, and then also having two young kids? Because I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we could barely do it. We could barely do it, right? With like even just like having one entrepreneur in the couple, having both being entrepreneurs, because it's such an enveloping thing to be an entrepreneur and building business. How do you guys manage that? What's that like? Tell me the good and bad.
Look, it's nutty. It is. I don't think either of us would recommend this part to other people, because the way we joke about it is it's like 4 startups, like in one house, because each of the kids obviously. You just got to be just as intentional, about growing a business as growing a child, if not more. The striking that balance is just a constant juggling act.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
In the very beginning, it was that much harder because of COVID, because everybody was all of a sudden, kind of restricted to your household. And that in itself, is not a big deal when you've got really young kids, because you're just in your household anyway. It was more the fact that, getting hired help was, problematic.
Yeah.
This idea that, you had to be, kind of like all bubbled up. And to that extent, we had made plans to fly my mother-in-law over from Malaysia, as she was around with Charlie's birth. But Malaysia locked down, immediately, just before she was about to come out. And so that meant we were literally doing on our own, for, some months into the pandemic. But we got her over here eventually. So, this is, now, I guess about 5 months ago. So it's been a lot better with her, able to basically, be someone that, can help out, but, also provide that grandma, kind of connection.
Yeah, it's family, yeah.
And that's something that I'm looking to do with my own parents. They haven't met Taylor, for example, for, similar reasons. They're all the way out in New Zealand that, again, has been, kind of closed off.
Yeah.
I think what's different, and the part that we are pretty intentional about is things like dinner times, and hey, at 5 o'clock after we pick up the kids, and they're now in the house after being at daycare for the day. We don't work, until they go to bed, and so it's intentional about dinner times. It's intentional about, kind of like, bathing the kids and, reading stories, all that kind of stuff, like as every parent does, has a set routine. And that's stuff that like Cheryl and I, like are doing, on a nightly basis, as opposed to, just because grandma's here, we don't offload everything to her, like that's deep, kind of bonding connection time, like for us as, the mother and father. And we really value that, like in terms of like, knowing who our kids are, like and seeing, the joy, they experience and, like the depth of their own personalities. And same thing for the weekends, like we don't work, like we don't, kind of, hey, I'm working all day Saturday, can you look after the kids? Like that never happens, like we, like we're all about, kind of activities for the kids and things like that and the weekends. But the downside, the where it costs us is in two ways, like after the kids go to bed, oh man, like the two of us, just beeline to, kind of our computers, and that's where we make up the time, and so that's, so you could say it's efficient, you could say it's like, also, pretty crazy because, we work long into the night, at times, just doing what we both feel is, kind of right thing by our startups, so that's where we're, the trade-off happens for us. And, I think we have to do that in bursts, like, and make sure that we're not killing ourselves, like in the process. Mm-hmm. The second area where I think, we're trading off right now is in, I don't know if this is like, getting too deep or TMI or whatever, but, like, isn't, frankly, my wife and I's connection, Cheryl and I's connection, like, as we kind of like, got into, this relationship, like we started off like fully intentional, like we read this book, Getting the Love That You Want, by Harville Hendricks, like we just kind of, it's all about imago theory and, like, and we, reread about all of the phases of, kind of like the attachment journey and, like just being, like the puppy love days where you're so infatuated, you can't see anything, but, like kind of roses, coming from the other person, through to the more realistic periods and, like, it requiring more intentional effort. We, and we started off with this idea that, like we are totally, we want to be intentional about this, we'd happily, like go to coaching and, and kind of like look for proactive ways to keep that connection and keep, like kind of designing a relationship. And I would say that's the area where, we're not, like right now we're not, like we're just kind of, the four startups are consuming our attention. And it's not creating problems for us, but it's just not the way we want to treat our relationship for an extended period of time either, because, we know that obviously, if anything that you don't pay attention to, that you,
like, do you have like a set time that you guys are talking about? It sounds like you guys talk about it, which is great, but it sounds like you actually thinking about this. Like, what's that set time? Have you guys actually articulated that set time? There's like 4 more years of this and then we have to change something, or?
Oh, I see. No, we haven't defined a period like that. Really, again, I think if you talk to any startup founder, it doesn't matter how big they get, they still feel like they're running around like a headless chicken, raising more money, get bigger teams, like it only gets, you think it's going to get better and,
It's what Biggie said, man, more money, more problems.
Maybe that's when they hire young and, like young
right.
makes it
that's
all.
That's right. Yeah, bring me in. I'll simplify for you. That's right. That's awesome.
No, look, we haven't talked about it, kind of like in those terms. I wouldn't like to see it, and to be honest, like I don't think I'd be happy with like an answer like, oh, we just got to sacrifice 4 years, like, and something as long as that. I think we, having just moved interstate, like recently, I think it's more a case of, hey, we we need to make sure that, we are investing in building the systems, that allow us to have more regular like check-ins with each other and touch points and date nights and, like all of the stuff that, just allows us to strike a healthy balance.
I've been doing that with Amy. We've been having a hard time keeping up with it because of, like coordination of schedules and busyness and work and all those things. But like a couple of months ago, we started doing weekly date nights and trying to protect it. And then it falls apart and then we get back on track and then it falls apart, get back on track. But like, it's like trying to figure out like how to like carve out your day in between the kids. Because you're realizing, I had a similar thing, and I don't think it's TMI at all. I think it's actually a very, very normal thing that happens because it seems like it happens to a lot of young parents. Sorry, parents that have young kids, not necessarily young parents, but like parents that have young kids. Because I think in the earlier time of their lives, they're so enveloping. They need so much stuff and they take so much time, right? And so they can't like brush their own teeth. They can't like, feed themselves. And so there's a lot more stuff that needs to be like done for them. Right. And then by nature, just it forces time away from, the couple. Right. And I think it's just like a default that happens. And so you have to like intentionally go to try to do it, because what Amy and I have found is that like without even like realizing it was happening, we got like so distant from each other. We had like our systems and things that we just did. We did the kids. We do the kids things the same as you. We like try to do dinner together, put the kids to bed together, and then we just kind of unwind. Our brains are so blasted, from the day that we're just like, oh, we need like an hour to like unwind and recoup. And then there's like really nothing left in the tank, for each other. And it's like, it's kind of like a cycle if you don't address it.
Right. So, have you got any tips? Like, have you found, kind of any ways to hack the system, so to speak?
I should ask more guests this as well too. That's probably a really good question to include into my repertoire here. But the one thing that I've been trying to do is basically do the date night thing and trying to have those date nights. And then the other thing that we've been doing that's been helping a lot more, at least on the emotional side, has been looking at old photos and videos together. I don't know if that rings true for you or not, but it goes back to the comment that you made about, hey, it's not about the time that I spend, like how much time I'm spending, it's about the quality of the time that I'm spending with them. I mean, you didn't say that like literally, but you're talking about how you're busy all day, but then this time is protected, weekends and evenings. And so you're like really focusing in on the kids. But I think it's like the same thing, right? It's like, is there a way to like focus the time that you're spending together to be more qualitative, right, and higher quality, and finding things that like trigger the emotional response and the bond faster? And I don't know, for me it works. Like I like looking at these old videos and photos with Amy, or send old photos and videos to each other even like while we're working, and then we look at like our kid when they were like 1, or like we look at like videos of us before kids, like young and happy and free, and like and it's just like, I don't know, it creates a little bond there. But those are 2 tactical things that I've been doing, but no, I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah.
Have you found anything?
I think for me, there's got to be something in like lowering the accessibility bar to that time. So, and so more recently, so since December, like I've been like getting back into like personal fitness, like I've just gone like a couple of years basically letting myself go, like as also happens to, fathers, with young kids. So, but in beginning of December, I decided enough is enough. And the first thing I did was I just bought these adjustable dumbbells. That's the only equipment I bought was just dumbbells. And like I've, in much younger times in my life, a decade ago, it's pretty consistent at going to the gym. So in terms of like the exercises and what I could do with those, I was pretty ingrained. I just wasn't doing anything. So I bought these dumbbells and I was like kind of flabbergasted at how much I could accomplish just with dumbbells. And now I'm thinking about, okay, well, maybe I should buy a barbell and, some other stuff for my home gym, because I've proven to myself that I will do it if it's there. And I should have joined a gym a long time ago, but I haven't, and so already, I've kind of like got, barriers, and then I've got to drive to the gym every time I work out, and I'll probably decide that, no, I don't have enough time before that meeting, or, and so on. And so I'm just kind of like, where my mind goes to in terms of like, like more time with Cheryl, like more quality time, is like, how can I lower that accessibility bar so that like it just becomes something that we do more often, as opposed to it trailing off, kind of like what you've said with date nights.
Yeah, it's just like it's the forced ranking of priorities, right? Like I think that it's like you're talking about something that's really actually near and dear to my heart at this point, especially kind of like the thesis of my podcast is this concept of like competing priorities. Like one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to start this podcast was because I wanted to figure out how to continue to grow as an entrepreneur and as a business owner and kind of my professional career, but also still continue to grow as like this kind of quintessential like dad, right? Being a really good parent. But what I was finding was that like being a good dad and all this stuff started taking up more of my priority and mind share. And then things like that, I had like my life mostly figured out all the way until it's like I had a kid, right? Everything was kind of like bucketed into these compartments, and I had this percentage of this. And like, I mean, I didn't break it down like by percentages, like literally, but I obviously did. You build this up and this kind of like system up, in your time frame, and then your kid comes in and then they just like completely they've shoved themselves into the top of the priority list, and then everything else starts to shuffle around it, and some things fall off, and you have to like really figure out how to reset that and reassess that, and it's a huge struggle for me. It's been a huge problem because my time with my wife ends up falling the quickest. I will say, like, it's just like, you're good, right? We're good, right? I love you. I'm going to go take care of the kids, or I'm going to go work, right? Like, it just becomes so easy because it's like the easiest thing to like knock off, because she's an adult. She's on the same team. Like, we're doing this together. Like, we're married. Like, and it's not right, but it's just what happens naturally. I'll say another thing that happened is the physical health. The physical health immediately falls off. Yeah. I mean, that thing just goes off like the moment I get busy. Like, there's not even like a question in my mind that's like, my kid's crying, I'm going to go do that versus work out.
Dude, the time that I work out is like 11 p.m. Like 11 p.m. I'm not even joking. Like that is my most common workout time, because that's when, you get all the kids and, a little bit, a few more emails fired off, and then it's like 11 p.m. I'm crazy. Like, am I really going to start? And it's like, well, when else am I going to work out? So I do it.
That's right. It's so funny that you said that, because I kid you not, like I worked out 2 days ago, and I haven't worked out in a while because I sprained my ankle. So I haven't been able to work out, but I literally worked out at 11 p.m. So it was like, it's same thing as you. Like, when are you going to work out? If you're going to do it, you have to do it at this ridiculous time, and you have to make it work. And then the problem, Jason, is then now you're pushing off sleep. Right. So something is always falling off. So it's really a matter of like, I got to read Tim Ferriss's book again, his 4-hour work week, because I'm telling you, there's not enough hours in the day, I think, at this point.
The secret chapter that he didn't put out there. It's a shame that we don't live closer together, because I was just thinking, what if we, like swap? What if we took turns exchanging kids, or like, or one family looking after 4 kids, like, while the other family goes out for a date night. Awesome. And so if that was locked in, right? If that was locked in, then, and say it's only once every 2 weeks or whatever, like you know that there's an obligation there, and so it's not just something where whatever's happening that day can override your date night, super easily, because, neither of you are that, vested or whatever. I wonder whether something like that would just create more discipline.
Oh my gosh. That could be a startup idea, actually. That's actually a really good idea. That could be a peer-to-peer business. I love it. I will say that I can't wait to see your house. I mean, look how beautiful your room is. What did you do there? Did you buy it like that, or did you design that?
Yeah, no, we bought it like this. It was actually owned by contractors. It was their own home. So we fortunate that they had really great design taste. In this room, this is it shows up pretty blue, like when the light's on it. But the stroke of genius was that dark accent, because it looks great.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's beautiful. I love it. Thank you. Then the kids love the move. They love being in Austin. Yeah, part of obviously, the beauty of moving out to Austin relative to like San Francisco is that there's a lot more space, as you enjoy as well. So
Now, with Taylor, the youngest, being 2, we can just open the door and let them both out, and they go and, they're pushing their things around the yard, and, he's now learned to wander all the way up, into the street, which is great, so, it's just wonderful to see them interacting with each other and, like working, playing together and, working their stuff out together, and somewhat independently.
Yeah. And so if I was to ask you, like, what you think your job is right now, like as a dad, what would you say that thing is? Like, what's the number one priority for you as it relates to being a dad?
Oh, that's a deep question.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Like, ultimately, I come from like a really strong family, like in New Zealand. Strong not only in the sense of like my parents and my 2 younger brothers, and I've got some older half siblings as well, who I'm also close with, and who have their own individual kids. Like we grew up together in a small town called Dunedin, New Zealand. And my parents ran small businesses, we got to observe, all of those kind of like strong work ethics that you get from like running restaurants and, like things like, that.
Yeah.
There is certainly, like lessons from those in terms of like independence and, the value of hard work and, like honesty and all that sort of stuff that I want to make sure that, like kind of we are able to, share with my children. But then I also have a much longer family lineage as well. So, my surname is Suhoi, and I'm Chinese. I'm of Chinese descent, even though, like I was born in New Zealand. And actually, I am 5th generation Kiwi Chinese. And so my great-great-grandfather emigrated from Guangzhou in China to California. This is in the late 1800s, in gold rush time. So he went to California, chasing the gold rush, joining the gold rush, and then he went to Australia because that's where the gold rush, kind of the next boom happened. And then after Australia, he went to New Zealand. And that's, where he spent, the rest of his life. And, he was a crazy town entrepreneur. Like he, by the time he reached New Zealand, he had worked out that gold mining's a terrible idea, and, it's too, like hit or miss. And so, by that time he decided he wanted to start up basically a picks and shovels, like literal picks and shovels business, selling picks and shovels to the new gold miners who were getting off the boat. And he set up like a trading business, import, export, wood back to China and fungus out from China for the Chinese, gold miners to eat. Just became this, huge community leader in New Zealand, amongst the Chinese, but also, like the European settlers. When the gold ran out, he saw these dredges in the harbour, like the harbour dredges that were trying to make, channels in the harbour so that ships could come in. And they were basically buckets on a conveyor belt that was scooping the sand out at the bottom of the harbour. And he was like, I wonder if there's gold in the middle of the rivers where people haven't got to yet. And so he redeployed those into the rivers to scoop out gold. And he set off an entire second boom for gold mining, which was hydraulic gold sluicing, and basically using technology, to mine gold. So this guy, I could go on and on. Like there's like so many facets to this story and who he was. But all 600-700 new Suhois in New Zealand descended from this one guy. And we know that because Suhoi's a made-up surname. So his name is Choi Suhoi. So his surname actually is Choi. I should be called Jason Choi. But because when he got off the boat, they were like, what's your name? He said Choi Suhoi. And they said, Charlie Suhoi, welcome to New Zealand. And so Suhoi stuck as the surname.
That's amazing.
So...
That's awesome.
So yeah, like we're all descended from this one guy, and so like when I guess when I think about like all of that, like, I mean, late 1800s, like he had no idea where he was going, like what gold mining was going to be like, what California was going to be like, Australia, like there was no like internet or like brochures or like, I don't know I don't know how you even make that decision to leave your family and go, go out into the world. But, he was curious. He had that curiosity to go and adventure out there and find what's out there. So, like I would love my kids, like to have some element of that, passed on. In some ways, when I retrace it, I'm kind of like doing the reverse journey, New Zealand, Australia, California, in the US. Clearly the guy was, like super adaptable, like, and just, one business opportunity, spying another opportunity, like triumphing through adversity. And then, he just loved to serve the communities he was in as well, like the people that he was working with. And he was a real centerpiece for the Chinese community. Like he set up it's funny to reflect on now, but he set up a subscription business for the Chinese community if gold miners passed away,
Wow.
they would have they were making payments in advance to him so that he could send their bodies back to China so that their families could tend to them in the afterlife. This idea of like basically, your family not being around to look after your body in New Zealand was kind of like, a strange thing in Chinese culture. So, that was one way where basically he was, helping the Chinese community stay connected, like between, everything that was going on in New Zealand and,
Wow.
and China.
Wow.
The real tragedy to his story is that he sent, I think 300, deceased Chinese back in the first journey. And then the second journey, some years later, he had actually passed away himself. And when they went to load all the bodies onto the ship and then the ship set sail, it actually struck a rock off the coast of New Zealand and sank. And it was the ship and all those bodies, him included, like it were lost, like for 100 years. And it's only in the last, I think 10 years ago, they worked out where the ship was. So, yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, long way of saying, like there are values that, like I think about a lot that I would love to pass, on to the children and make sure like they're connected with. And even that family connection, right? Like which we've managed to preserve over those generations and that ties us together. It's hard to keep that when I'm living with the family all the way out here in the US. So
Yeah, exactly. And then there's so much nuance. Yeah.
So, I'm not sure what the solution is yet. I just know what I want to do. And so when you ask me like, what's the number one kind of like priority for me, like what do I think about a lot? It's all of that, it's kind of like, I have my kids, they're beautiful. And I know that their lives are going to be so much richer for having what I have. And so, like, how do I kind of reconcile all of that in the modern world?
Yeah, that's an amazing story. That's so cool. And now I know what you mean by saying you have a very powerful family. Like it's like a very dominant lineage and cool history, but also probably sounds like a very confident entrepreneurial family that stemmed from that original forefather, for lack of better words, right? But then the other question kind of comes into like, how do you do that when you're so separated from the family unit and that history and that nuance? That's what I was trying to get at, is like, because a lot of that stuff you were nurtured into. And so you have this sense of duty or responsibility or like accountability to honor that because you kind of grew up with it, where your kids are not growing up with that, right? They don't have that nurture. They might have the nature, but you're not, you don't have as much of the stuff around it, right?
Right. I mean, WhatsApp, like, thankfully.
Yeah, exactly. No, you don't have to answer it. I'm in the same boat as you. I mean, I left my family in San Francisco. Yeah. So I'm here by myself too.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no worries. There's no real answer to that question. Let me switch gears here a little bit, just because we have to wrap up here, and I do want to make sure I ask you my rapid fire questions that I ask every guest. So no matter how far fetched our conversations go, which went awesome places today, I loved it. I do want to make sure I ask every guest the same 5 questions. So I'm gonna shoot them off to you. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Let's do it.
What advice do you have for other parents and soon-to-be parents?
Well, I mean, I think everybody, everybody's busy. Like every parent, anyone that's listening to this podcast is going to be, like it doesn't matter if it's startups or jobs or like your own kind of like hobbies or even frankly, like just, fully, like 100%, looking after kids, like it doesn't matter what formula you have, it's always busy. So, I mean, the thing that I did quite early on, embraced early on, was like kind of like layering on multitasking, in the shorter sense of the world. And so, even though I mentioned I was letting myself go, in from a physical fitness point of view, like what I was successful at doing was squats and lunges. And so our kids were not the kind of kids that like you could just like put down and they would see themselves off to sleep. They're a bit more high maintenance in that regard, and so in a lot of contexts that that can be a source of frustration and kind of anxiety and just it doesn't make you feel great, right? Like when you feel like you've been up all night. But I found, so I just started trying squats and lunges, like while I'm carrying a baby. It's like, okay, well, what if I do this? I'm getting my workout in, I can, and so my kids got used to 100 squats. And then by the time I got like continuously, and once they got to about 80 or 90, they would regularly be off to sleep. And then, I could lay them down, which obviously, like served at least two goals. Sometimes I'd be listening to a podcast as well. So, there'd be 3 goals served there. So, like I think, and then the 4th goal of just mentally you feel better, like as opposed to like having to deal with the kid, who won't go to sleep, like and just working yourself up, you're feeling like you're being productive. And then, like advice for like would-be parents, I think to a similar extent, it's like, getting good at fun distractions. Like we all know, like we get to choose our reaction to whatever our kids throw at us. And it takes a little bit of practice. It takes a little bit of practice to not react like sometimes the natural way, which is, like just to ignore or to be annoyed, and there is like literally always, as I've found, a way to distract or, like to turn into a fun game or just be stupid. Quite frankly, be silly. Like that's the thing that works, as I'm sure this is part of your playbook too. Like it's, you just be silly and all of a sudden they'll eat the broccoli, like you do Baby Shark around their face, like, and all of a sudden, the food's going down, like it's, that I've found again, in terms of like, just mental well-being and, and the whole mood in the room is a really powerful thing.
Nice. If you can go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what advice would you give yourself?
I think, I guess looking at, where things are at right now, and, just the fact that, again, I would invest in, kind of relationship with my wife, like as much as possible, or that's what I miss. It naturally extends then, like I would double down, on that, leading up to kids and really make the most of that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very sweet. Very sweet. I love that. Very nice. What's the most surprising thing that you learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
how much, I'm not just saying this because you invited me on this podcast, how much I love being a girl dad, like without a doubt, we did the typical thing of, do you want a boy or do you want a girl? And honestly, like I didn't care, but I slightly favored a boy. And then when we got a girl, I was like, okay, this is cool. But then when you hold a girl in your arms, like as a dad, like it's such
amazing.
a crazy, powerful feeling, and we like I used to sing to her, I quite like singing, I've sung in like cover bands before, so I used to sing to her a lot, and now she loves singing, like she's a bit of a performer and entertainer. My wife and I did an elaborate, dance at our wedding, to one of Ed Sheeran's songs, and she loves watching that, and she makes me dance that with her. So the two of us, my wife has requested actually for her birthday that we do come up with some kind of a dance for her. So anyway, we just have a special bond.
So
that
cute.
Everyone has a special bond with their kids, but I'm surprised by I guess how much I enjoy that girl dad relationship.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm so surprised with that one as well too. So switching gears a little bit, what's your all-time favorite business book?
My all-time business book, I would say Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Nice.
It was one of the very first.
I was not expecting
one
that.
of the very first, like that read, and I would say the reason I choose that is it set things in motion for me very early on in life.
It's the catalyst.
Yeah, it was because it's a broad business book, right? And it's kind of like it's really good at providing a broad overview of how money works, and how real estate works and how the stock market works. But and there's follow-up books, and I did then go on to read, I think it's Real Estate Riches, my brother and I read that at the same time, and we both were like, man, this is a no-brainer. Like, this is when you have money, this is what you do with it, and so of course with investing, the earlier you start, the more impact, it has on your life. And so in terms of just net outcome of having read a book, that for sure, I think, that is my favorite.
It's awesome. And then last question to bring us home here, Jason. When you're not being a super entrepreneur with Supercast and a super dad with your two kids and a super husband to your lovely wife, what do you do for your downtime? What do you do for fun?
There is no other time. There is no other time. That's why, I mean, that that is the reality of this period of life, I think, or at least the way we're approaching it. Obviously then fitness has come into it recently, as I mentioned. So 11 p.m. workouts come into it, and if I, for whatever the other time is, it's connecting with my parents. It's keeping that the FaceTimes and whatever going between my kids and their grandparents in New Zealand, and all that sort of stuff. So and then making time for the dinner that we met at, the founders dinner that we met at, that's an area where we both, my wife and I, we get a lot of energy from, is just kind of getting external interaction, making sure that we're not spending all of our time within these four walls.
I think that I agree with you on that. I never really thought about that as my outlet, but I think it is my outlet as well too. Meeting other smart people that are building things, those founders dinners, and having engaging conversations that are out of my sphere, that are not within my coworkers or employees or business, and that it's not within my family, but people like you. Yeah, it's actually really interesting. That is actually really cool. Jason, thank you. This has been wonderful. I can't believe I got to know you even better than when we were drinking and eating. So this has been a fantastic conversation. I can't appreciate your time more. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
Yeah, great to chat. That's the wonderful thing about podcasts.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, man. See ya.
Thank you for listening to The Girl Dad Show. Please take a moment to follow us on social media. You can find us at The Girl Dad Show on all major platforms. We look forward to staying in touch and keeping you up to date with all the new guests that are coming out.